Hey everyone, I'm Nicole Beatty with Capacity for Community, and I'm so excited to introduce you to this episode's guest of Impact Unfiltered. I'm here with a dear friend who I've known, I think, Robert, we're hitting our 20th anniversary as friends. Folks, this is Robert Windrum. I'm going to let him introduce yourself, but one of the things himself, but what I love about this space is not only working with incredible people, but befriending people who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. And Robert, you are one of those to my heart. You're a very dear human and very dear friend, someone I greatly admire. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. There was no hesitation to say yes when you suggested this because I always love talking to you and connecting and catching up. Yeah, for sure. It's my pleasure, and I really love the concept behind this podcast. And community has always been a big part of my job and my focus and my values. I think it comes from going back to being raised in a church and having my father be a Baptist minister for the early years of my life. And whether or not I am in line with that institution anymore doesn't really matter, but it was growing up where community was the focus and community was the connection.
Mhm.
And this is something that I've carried with me, a value throughout my entire life.
I really appreciate you sharing how community has been part of your roots. And one of the things I was fascinated with you when I met you, we met at the Toronto General Western Hospital Foundation, and watching your journey and your career evolve since we've known. Can you tell our listeners what has your own personal development in community uh, been over the several decades?
Sure, sure. I mean, my start was to be an artist, and my initial education was in visual art and to be an artist. And I actually had and have now returned to my first career as somebody who makes art. And I think that's part you can't help but have an understanding or an appreciation for the viewer and speaking to the viewer, and that viewer can be one-on-one or it can be community. So that was kind of where things started. And then my day job was working in public galleries and doing outreach and education, which of course is community outreach and
Hmm.
that evolved to calling upon the transferable skill of fundraising, which is grant writing, events, lottery ticket sales, and all of that stuff, and worked entirely in the nonprofit charitable sector. My entire career has been there, and worked through arts organizations and community organizations, and then, like you mentioned, hopped into healthcare philanthropy and moved from being the general manager of the Canadian Lesbian and Gay Archives, which is now just simply called the Archives,
Hmm.
into the Toronto General Western Hospital Foundation. And, that was maybe not as direct contact with a community, but you did have, the community of donors and the community of healthcare.
Hmm.
And in Canada, having a socialized healthcare system, you can't help but be aware of the fact that it's a community, it's a broad service and right, and
Hmm.
for everyone. So it's always been, in one form or another, speaking out and speaking to and harnessing the efforts and energies of a community. And now, as I've entered my third act, I am back in Stratford as the interim director curator at Gallery Stratford, where I had been in this role from 1998 to 2005.
Wow.
Public gallery. It's community based. It's Stratford's an amazing community. It's
Yeah.
rich in culture. It's rich in industry. It's rich in tourism. It's rich in so many ways, and the people that
Hmm.
here are fantastic. So I kind of feel like I'm kind of come full circle back around to art and
Yeah.
community and gallery, and yeah, I'm loving it.
And I love, first of all, I was thinking full circle, and that was going to frame my question after listening to your incredible journey. And you are a beautiful artist, and I love how you reference the third act. You're always having some arts or cultural reference, but in that full circle, especially from, the late 80s to now, we're well into, the 2020s. What changes have you seen? And this is a broad question, but what changes have you seen in the community sector? Are they good changes? Are they bad changes? What have you seen in that full circle journey?
Oof, yeah, well, certainly times have changed. It's funny because as I come back to Gallery Stratford, I've kind of been saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same, because some of the challenges here are similar as they were 20 years ago.
Sure.
And I have to say that about the sort of kind of the community sector as well. But there's been some real shifts, serious shifts throughout the last 20 25 years, I think, where our concept of community has become, or needs to become, or is increasingly inclusive,
Mm,
that we're actually aware that there are multiple communities,
mm,
and that your community is not necessarily your neighbor's community, and that you can belong to several different communities, and
mm,
that I think our understanding of the world should have shifted to being a broader, more inclusive perspective. I
right.
also think because of that, perhaps we're more polarized. We're
Mm,
more, black and white. We're more conservative versus liberal. We're more, you know, um, uh, you know, gender divided. In
mm,
some respects, but I just kind of uh, feel that it's growing pains, and that it's also, I think from the cultural sector and from the not-for-profit sector, community has begun to play a bigger role.
mm.
Certainly coming to this place, the public
Sure.
groups.
I was going to ask you actually, what role do you see art playing in community building? What role does art play in bringing people together in an era of polarization?
Oh, absolutely. It's so important. It's so important. And this ties in with what I was going to say about
Sorry.
the public. No, it's perfect. The public purse is shrinking. It's not
Mm,
something that can be relied upon. So arts organizations like this public gallery, in my opinion, have to be more entrepreneurial.
mm,
Being more entrepreneurial means you have a product and you have a market, and you are driving funds into your organization
mm,
from the community, which means you need to be engaged with your community, and you need to
mm,
be offering something where it's a meaningful experience and a meaningful engagement. And that's where I feel like art becoming more um, uh, uh, almost activism in some respects,
mhm,
that it's not just the hallowed halls of culture that a few elite strata of society have access to, that it's really got to be community based. And it
mm,
doesn't mean that you don't do exhibitions and you don't present things on the white walls of the gallery, but you have a way of making people feel comfortable and making people engage in the dialogue about what's on the walls.
right.
And you open up the programming. I mean, art is an opportunity for so many voices that have not been given platforms, that have not been given opportunity to be heard. And that's really something in my own programming and curatorial work that I'm really focused on, in terms of where are the Indigenous and the BIPOC artists that have been excluded from art history, that have been excluded from a lot of the institutions.
Mm,
Women's voices,
mm,
economic diversity. It's
mm,
I think it's the perfect arena for a lot of dialogue and a lot of conversation that can be mediated into conversation and dialogue, not bitter comments in the comment section online on social media.
uh, Robert, I just I'm appreciating so much of what you're saying. You said something I think so important about how art creates a platform or gives a platform for voices that aren't heard, or in the dual role I have in municipal politics and then consulting the nonprofit sector, we talk a lot about how do we nurture and cultivate respectful discourse. Can you build off of that a little bit more? I love how you said art gives that opportunity for conversation and not necessarily these siloed buckets on, social media comments. Can we explore that a little bit further about how, art plays a role in community conversations?
Yeah, well, I think, it's a bit of a fine line, because part of being entrepreneurial means that a lot of programming now is going to be paid for. It's going to be ticketed. It's not going to be able to be free unless there's a sponsor of some source. So I don't want to eliminate people who can't afford to buy the ticket. So keeping it
Right.
accessible is a challenge, and it's
Sure.
something to address, but also ongoing on-site conversations that are casual, that are maybe mediated. We have a great summer show coming up where there's so much to address that I want to be running a series of sort of salons where people come, and there may be a focus, or there may be an individual that's the focus of the salon, but it's not sitting and listening. It's sitting and talking and conversing and engaging and asking questions, and that everybody creating an atmosphere, which, I think galleries and museums and art can do, where there are no wrong questions, there are no stupid questions. There's like an opportunity for personal interpretation. There's personal perspectives, and it's just, discuss it, and sort of engage in what the artist or the art is kind of triggering in the discussion. So I mean, that's for me personally, in an art gallery, that's kind of the priority and the direction that I really want to go. And not shying away from work that might be controversial, that might be,
Sure.
provocative, and inviting that discourse that is reasonable and
Mhm.
not uh, like, for example, somebody asked if we had a comment book here. And I said, no, I don't want a comment book, because number one, you just generally get people's names and the cities that they're from. So that doesn't do us any good. Or you get the nasty comments.
Mm.
And the nasty comments are akin to the comment sections on social media, where somebody's going to say, this exhibition's a piece of shit, and leave. Does
Mm.
anybody any good? There's
Mm.
no benefit from that. But
Mm.
having opportunity, I'll just say one thing is, we're very low staff at the moment. So I get stuck at the front desk now until I can build my volunteer base to man the front desk. So I talk to visitors all the time, and I love that dialogue. And that's, whoever sits at this front desk has to be able to engage in a conversation with the visitors one-on-one in a really meaningful way, not just hello, pay your admission, and leave it at that.
Sure, sure. Because I'm assuming in those conversations, there's also that engagement, but there's also the storytelling and bringing the gallery to life. So when you talk about what I'm hearing is there's that fine balance between wanting to facilitate or curate a space where conversation can be had. I agree with you, entrepreneurial for nonprofits. We're forced in that position, but I think there's also an opportunity there because we can have more autonomy with our funding and our operations without always having to chase a public purse that is getting smaller and smaller. But what I'm trying to get at is so that balance of creating a space, but also not creating additional barriers for people to participate in a safe space to have open and curious conversations.
Yeah. I mean, that really is the challenge.
Mm.
And there's been, particularly in the UK, there's been a movement from funding agencies to put out guidelines on what programming and what art can be shown, and that, political art of a political nature will not be funded and cannot be shown. And it's direct censorship. But it's bizarre, because art is political, no matter how, fluffy it seems, or how provocative it seems, it is political. So I don't know how they would be able to sort of regulate that, because I think that there can be, you can show landscapes, and you can sure get into a political, meaningful conversation
Interesting.
around landscapes. Um,
Does that mean we're starting to see the censorship of the arts? Or is that a far reaching?
No. I think that's directly what it is. I think that's directly what it is. I haven't seen anything in Canada
Hmm.
from a funding agency that has denied. It's likely has happened, but it's not come across my radar just yet. But
Sure.
yeah.
Well, and do you think, if we were registered charities, we have that compliance of we can only do X% of our activities on advocacy and politics. So I wonder if that's, already within our governing and funding structures. I'm mindful of time. I do just want to come back
Mhm.
to I was recently at the Ontario Nonprofit Conference and I got, quite enthusiastic and this renewed bold ambition for the sector. But they asked the professionals in at the conference a question, what is your dream for the sector? And I want to ask that question of you because you have kind of come full circle. You have dedicated your career and your own personal passion to this sector. You've traveled from art into healthcare and back into art. Um, so Robert, I would like to wrap up the conversation with what is you have your own dreams, but what are your dreams for the sector?
Hmm. I would like it to be a loving, kind, compassionate, and empathetic
Mm,
sector where, the sense of nonprofit and support is continually focused on the good that comes of it, that
mm,
creates creates positivity and creates a better world and doesn't get bogged down in some of the governance and political issues that can
mm,
happen in nonprofit community-based organizations.
mm,
Whenever you bring a group of people together on a board or whatever, you're going to have personalities and you're going to have, differing opinions. And that's, again, where that meaningful dialogue that is not polarized, that is not confrontational
mm,
or conflict based, uh,
mm,
has to take place. So I think I would hope that there was an ever increasing understanding of how connected we all are to each other, and that going into a divisive, polarized role is damaging to everyone, and moving more towards the understanding that we're all connected and the world is getting smaller and more connected, and that what we do has impact
mm,
on our immediate community, but also elsewhere in the world. And that we learn from some of the lessons of the recent past, and work towards a more positive, inclusive, compassionate future.
That is going in the quote book, Robert. An increasing understanding that we are all connected to each other. What a wonderful way to end the conversation. As I said in the opening, I have always appreciated the connection that we have. Thank you for your openness in this conversation. We'll have information about you and the gallery in the comments or in the caption description that comes with this video. I'm so excited for you on this next curve of the circle that you're in. And I wish you all the best and thank you for what you bring to the sector and now to Stratford and the gallery and the community there.
Oh, my pleasure. Always great to talk to you. This was way too short. There's far too much to talk about, but it's always great to connect.
Yeah. Well, Robert, you're definitely going to come back for a second chapter. But until then, have fun at the gallery. I look forward to making a visit to Stratford. And to our listeners, if you have any questions about the art space, Robert is definitely a go-to person. As I've been saying, be gentle with your heart and be kind to other people. So thank you, Robert, for being here.
My pleasure. It's great.
Take care.